This is Sunshine, this is Lola, this is Odin is the bull, and this Vidar is the son. His name, Richie and Teensy were going to take him, and they were naming him Adam. But obviously, appropriately, now that he's come back to a heathen household, he gets a heathen name, and he is Vidar, the son of Odin. The super strong son of Odin, which is part of what inspired him to be Vidar. Because I could not hold on to him. He jumped with my arms wrapped around him, jumped 3 feet in the air and kicked sideways. With my arms wrapped fully around his neck. I was in shock. And Vidar is actually, during Ragnarok, Odin gets killed by the Fenris wolf. And Vidar, he goes to the Fenris wolf and he puts one leather booted foot on his bottom jaw and leather gloved hand on his top jaw and rips his head clean in half. And so part of the contribution to Ragnarok was when you made shoes and you repaired them, any leftover leather scraps were sacrificed to Vidar so he could use that to build his shoe to protect him from the teeth of the Fenris wolf. So after giving me such a display of strength, we went with Vidar. You bet.
Last year we talked about the runes and you talked about the first one being the cow, the symbol of the cow, and like that's how you start your farm. What does it mean to you now that the cows are here?
My farm now feels complete. I'm sure you've noticed over the last couple of days where I regularly just proudly look down from the porch and look at my cows. This is the beginning of symbiosis of life. Hi, Lois. So what the cow truly represents is the start of the farm. And milk's been demonized now, and part of the process of that is through the pasteurization and all the nasty things that they do to milk. But the problem is we as a society want the ease and the comfort of being able to go buy that milk in the store and then have it sit in the fridge for a week. And when I milk Lola here and I go put it in our fridge immediately, it's going to sour within 5 days. And that's just how it's going to go. So I can't have that convenience and have the lively milk. So part of this is just our societal choices. But living like this, I get to have that good live milk that's really building for the body and wonderful. And there's a symbiosis. As you can see, you've got hay here. You can see over there I've got a mineral lick and a salt lick and water. And they had ran away last night, so I had to go retrieve them and walk them home so they're not in danger. There's a symbiosis with these, and that's where you got to start with life. From the very first moment you take breath, you are part of this world, and there's a symbiosis that you need to be part of. And so when you, as an adult, start taking your own life on and you're building it, the first step is symbiotically with this cow that is going to help provide for you and your family, and you're going to provide for, and you're immediately going to start that cycle, and everything builds from that point. So having these guys home makes my farm feel complete, and it's really been nerve-wracking not having them here, and they were with some real nice, good people, but still being able to, right from my porch, look down and in the morning, being able to go out here, and I said Sunshine here is drying up, or want her to dry up, and we're going to continue milking Lola for the time being, and then he's going to impregnate Sunshine, and then next year we'll start milking Sunshine and let Lola dry up so we aren't beating up our cows. This is part of why I live in this small farm environment. Now I get to do things like not have my cow milk its entire life until it's completely deplete and dies, and so this thing was just something I used. It's something I lived symbiotically with and made sure it had a good life like I do. Nonsense, and you can see these guys here, that's a huge deal and something we don't realize as humans. Because the government took control of the sodium and the salt, and they feed you this salt that, your Morton factory, the big one there is in Salt Lake City, and they take the Salt Lake and they just put it in these fields and let the sun dry the water off, and they go back and collect the salt. It's sitting next to the road, right next to the highway. There's all kinds of exhaust fumes and everything soaking into that. You can actually smoke salt and then they process it and stuff and iodize it. And we've been told salt's all horrible, and an overload of it absolutely is. But sodium is, they call it the Aquarius salt because it's the water bearer, and your body won't absorb water into it without a proper load of sodium in it. So this one over here is going to be your sodium, the white one that they're looking at now. And animals naturally know these things. If they know that they need some salt, they're going to come over and lick on the salt. And this one here has got a bunch of your other minerals. This one you call a mineral lick. Make sure that they have the proper mineral load all around. That's it. If I took Lola and burnt her down, when it was left, all the carbon would burn away, all the just cellular material would burn down into a pile of white ash. And then after I ran distilled water through that and cleaned that out, we'd just have the same cell salts just like a human, just in a little different combination because this is a cow. And so she needs all those salts in order to thrive and to grow. And so you got to make sure you provide them. Yeah. One of the things that most people talk about with health, and when you're eating your nutrition, there's been a real heavy emphasis put on your carb load, your fat load, your protein load's a huge one. That one everybody wants to talk about. And they don't want to talk about the minerals, which half of where your hunger is coming from is because you're hungry for a certain mineral that your body needs. And then you go shoving a bunch of food in there that don't contain that mineral, you don't actually stave off the need. You haven't fulfilled it. So you just keep being hungry and just keep having problems. And so people just keep eating like this and doing this. And then you see these people that are horribly obese, but yet have nutritional lack, even though they're obese. And that's because they've been feeding their body things that it does not need, rather than meeting the needs. So we need to look back into our salts, which is what we consider a mineral or an electrolyte. And that's what is going to set the pH of your body. It's what's going to set electroconductivity, because your entire human body, from your brain signals to your heart to your bowels moving, is all done through electrical signal. And if you don't have the proper salt ratio and the proper salts in there, your electroconductivity won't be correct. And then that signal has a real hard time carrying. And this is obviously the primary herd. These guys are not as likely to run you over as Odin is, so we keep them up by the house. This is Amidala. We call her Mamadala. She's the mama or the grandma of everybody, or the mom. And this is our baby. This is the one that there's pictures of me of, and she's just like a dog basically. But this is Ostara, and this is the dad of everybody. This is Mr. Stinky. He's ridiculous. And this is Roxanne, and this is the head alpaca herd sire. This is Obsidian. And this is Jade. She's only, or Jed, I mean, this is only she's only 2 years old. And this one's Smokey. Smokey's a rescue from another herd, so is Roxanne. And then Buddy, we've had Buddy since South Dakota, also kind of a rescue. He's Ruby's baby, and this is Ruby over here with, we got some bad hay this year from the place in Eureka, and it caused 2 of our alpacas to miscarry. So Smokey Girl and Roxanne both miscarried this year. But Ruby, she didn't miscarry out of it, and so we got a little Topaz over here. She's our baby from this spring. A little Topaz, and Ruby's Buddy's mom. So hopefully we have a good year next year. You know, now we got 4 breeding age girls now, because little Jet, she's come of age, so Obsidian's really been after her. But this is the primary herd, and then we got Silver Boy in back. Christy and I spent a lot of this winter burning this up, and when the guys were here, they helped with that too. That was right before the guys left that we started really hitting that hard. So these 2 stumps are all we got left, and pull them together, but we're going to probably put the solar panels right there, and then I want to run a fence from there up to the porch area, and split the yard basically in two, and I'm going to have two herds, and Silver Boy will be over there and Obsidian will be over here with the younger girls, is what the plan is. And then we have the chicken coop that Snake and Company built, and me and some of the guys built the run, and that's still standing. This was some starts I tried doing, but the birds had already discovered the area, and as you can see a nice little blue right there, Hugh. This is the peacocks. They're the only ones that really enjoy flying. Here's some more evidence. And so after they discovered that, so the ones I planted prior to discovery did pretty good. I haven't harvested these ones yet. But this was what little gardening I did this year because of the birds, until I get that really nice fencing set up to where I can keep them from destroying everything I plant. And decide, the worst part is like if I pluck this potato, I'm immediately chucking except for the actual tubers themselves, chucking the rest to the birds. So they just rob themselves too. But that's part of why you're the caretaker and they're the lesser thing. But I couldn't do too much, so I just took these, and as you can see, it's actually a straw and soil mix. Tubers, because that's going to grow a nice big fat potato. They don't like compact ground. They like real easy drainage and stuff. And so that's also part of why I did potatoes up here, because then since the bucket's half straw, it's not so horribly heavy. And then I got my fruit trees up here for what they're worth, that the birds won't leave alone for nothing. But we actually had a pretty nice harvest of. I did primarily purples this year. Look at that nice purple vibrancy of that. That's nice. So we did I really like purple potatoes. Most of your fruit and vegetables, when you have a different varieties that you can choose from, when you have a choice of the darker variety typically is going to have, well, a lot of times it's going to be like different. It's more antioxidant, things like that, more free radicals, or it's going to eat up more free radicals, things like that. But in the purple and then in the darker. But it also has a deeper flavor, usually a heavier nutrient load in general with the darker ones. Whereas a society, typically we've went to this real anything that we can get to be as sterile as possible and as white and clear as possible. That's what we think is the good stuff, because it's nice and sterile. And it's just the opposite. So it's a very unfortunate thing. But I planted mostly purple. There's some nice pink ones in here and some white ones, but mostly purple. But they came out pretty nice. So I was pretty happy with it. We got a couple buckets of potatoes. Yep. But from about there, you can see it. All that was just this giant wood pile. And that's about the only area we really have left to finish cleaning up. We've been pulling all the garbage and stuff. It seems like all the lots around here were used as grows, and almost like they took the trash and put it on our lot, which isn't set up for a grow. Which is fine, because that's part of why we got it for the price we did, is then you're going to put the sweat equity, as they like to call it, into it, which we have. And again, that's fine. It was desirable, that's why we bought it. But now that we're getting down there, we just got this little pile left. And once we've got the land knocked down and cleaned up to where we want it to be, then we can start rebuilding and shaping and rebuilding and planting the orchard grass that our animals like, and all the things like that, setting up irrigation. I'm probably going to put in some swales, because when you're on these really heavy, steep terrains, one of the things to do is just make small little steps, and then on the very back of the step, you run a trench. And then if you water up at the top, it's just naturally going to follow that trench all the way down, and it'll root feed everything on each level. And that's called swales. So it's a really effective way to use these steeped terrains and grow in these steep terrains like this. Because last year, even though this was completely covered with plant life and you couldn't see anything, the majority of it was blackberry bushes and such, which they only take up a little root space, and then they cover up a real vast space around them. So it really wasn't as much plant life as what it looked like. And you couldn't even tell that there was anything more than a goat path up to this house. There certainly didn't look like there was a driveway with parking, the whole nine. But when Steve gets here, Steve Poikinen from Slow News Days, our friend, he's coming. So we're probably going to tear down this front shed, which is part of why I've got the batteries hooked up this year now. Come on, buddy. Come on. Come on. So even though I've got the battery bank in here right now, you can see that I knocked out these 2x4s here, and the inverter itself and the pieces that are going to need to stay are actually hooked onto the other wall on the other side. And this whole thing is going to come down. This isn't really built right and not built well, and we're going to match it to the house, and then for the whole length of it, take it out through the front of the house, which will expand the house just a little bit, like 10 by 10, add like 10 feet by 15 feet or something. Just enough to make the living room a lot nicer. And then this will be a nice tool room. And all we'll have to do is unhook the batteries, haul them out, put the new floor in, haul the batteries back in, and hook them up. So then that won't be such a terrible job as it would be if I had to move the entire electrical system, which every now and then you've got to service these batteries anyway. So at the same time, while I'm disconnecting the system to do that, I'll probably just take the batteries and service them at that point in time. So this is basically just got turned into a tool room, and now it's the electrical. My dad came and helped me do the roof on this, and I put this together. Still got a little bit more to do. We're going to put the window in there, which is why the sidings, or this side layer of siding isn't screwed down completely, because we're going to take a little bit of it off, put in a couple windows. and then I obviously put this extended awning out here so I can hang hoses, electric wires, stuff like that. And it also gives him a nice, you can see sitting right here, a nice little shade square away from the vicious sun and keep his water in it. This is Silver Boy. He's the other one that I want to be the herd sire for the older herd. But we've mostly cleaned up the backyard. This was pretty much all trash too. Another one of the things we had to do last year when we moved in, it was all of our propane line was ran in this, and then with these just, I'm going to assume, I haven't taken it apart, but I'm going to assume this is just a barbed fitting, and then they put a hose clamp on it, which apparently must have worked at one point in time, but definitely is not something that's going to hold for very long. And when we got here, it was all like that. So I ran black pipe all through the house. That piece over there is zip tied off because the grandsons were playing back here and they wanted to turn that on, and we're probably going to put a full-time stove back here. So in the summertime, we like to try and cook outside rather than inside and heat the house up. So I left an open spot, but put some black pipe in here permanently. And now with the electrical system in there, we do have enough power, especially we got the once we get the panels up, run a little air conditioner in the afternoon, try and knock it down from 110 to 90 or something. But we're going to fence this entire thing off basically in the same manner that I did below, with the 4x4s and the solid fencing like that. And I'm actually going to extend that up 8 feet and then tie it off to the house, so it's going to be tied to the house, so that way the birds can't get in here. He's obviously getting kicked out into one of these two side areas, and this is all going to then get built up as a garden. So it's real nice that he's back here already shitting the place up, because that's going to be the primary base of said garden. We've taken all that other poop I've been collecting, and it's off to the side of the house, and collecting it up, and we'll be filling this area up with some nice alpaca and chicken crap and some of the cow from below, and we'll let that rot over the winter and break down. And next spring, I think Christy and I were talking about doing another thing next spring, and whoever wants to come out, and obviously first priority to anybody that's been here. But we're talking about doing it next spring when we go and start the permaculture garden. So that way anybody that is interested in doing their own gardening and animal husbandry gets to see the gardening and how a permaculture garden starts. And that way they can go home and immediately start it. So that's going to be next year's plan. But we're going to fence this off probably right about a little bit past where this fence line is, but when it starts sloping up real hard, we're not trying to dig out too much of the land. And then at that point, it actually starts coming even with almost the kitchen window, so we also can't backfill it that far either, and we don't want to. So we're just going to do it up to there, and then I'm probably going to line this side of the house here with fruit trees is the plan. And again, it's got to be tied off to the roof because the birds are just horrifying with the fruit trees. They will not leave them alone. Like the leaves of the fruit trees are extra delicious. And up toward the top there, where you can see even in the height of the day, there's quite a bit of shade. We'll try and put our more cruciferous vegetables that don't do well in the sun and tend to bolt when the sun hits them. So we'll put the more cruciferous things and the greens, the more delicate greens, spinach, things like that up top. And then down here, it'll start as the more sun-heavy area gets. You start putting your things that require it, your fruiting things, your melons, your squashes, things like that, beans that can need that heavier sunlight. So that's going to work out real good because of the way the land is here. We'll be able to kind of set up a little bit of a microclimate situation. And then hopefully also next year, as you can see with all these downed trees, up top here isn't near as wet as the lot down below is, where we also have a whole bunch of these fallen trees, and the ones down below, because of the heavier moisture, have been rotting, and almost none of those are useful as firewood or as milling. But what they will be useful for is going and getting plugs to match the type of trees that they are and starting to do some mushroom plugs. And that's the really good source for your mushroom plugging. So I'm going to go down hopefully next year and start throwing mushroom plugs down in the ones down below and start getting some mushrooms going also. And as you can see here, the spring over here, we can probably tap that this next year also. We've been surviving off the one that Badger tapped over here, and that one's doing real good. And as you can see, it's still flowing real nice. I had to change out the catchment. I took a 55-gallon barrel, cut it in half, and then cut a slot in the front of it and dug it into the channel there, so it catches the water real well, and then ran that straight down to a catchment up there, and I pump it up top, so that way we get gravity feed. But Badger's little well and cleaning out the spring still holding real nice. But in general, the water levels everywhere around here have dropped severely this year. So we're thinking we're going to probably tap this other side too maybe, and then there's a spot down there by the duck coop where we might also tap. That I think that's showing water leak. That one actually leaks quite a bit of water. And if we just dig a hole and punch a hole in the right spot, we can put some direction to that and start making some use of it instead of just letting it flood into the duck area. If need be. But this is part of why it's so important to have a place where you have access to your own water, and why that's my first priority when I'm looking at land, is having access to flowing water. Is because, like right now, the situation in Northern California is that I was listening to the radio yesterday in Arcata. They can't get water. Almost every city in Northern California is on severe water restrictions. They're talking about shutting people's water off completely, and then having a $100 reconnection fee after they're going to be shut off during the duration of the drought because they couldn't behave during the drought or whatever. And it's going to be a $100 reconnection fee if they want it reconnected after they can possibly get it done after the drought is over. So, some of the smaller communities that don't have access as well are talking about having to get water shipped in by truck, which obviously is not a feasible way to continue with an entire community to have it shipped in. If you've ever lived just on an individual basis where you have a cistern and you have to have somebody come in and fill the cistern, it's a real hard way of living. So for an entire community to do that. That's just not feasible. So this is a problem. So when you're looking at going and picking a home, that flowing water, that is the big one of the biggest things. You are not doing anything without water. That's just a fact. You can build earth, you can change things, you can cut trees. You can't make water appear. It has to be there. Yep. Here's the other stream that goes by the other side of the house. Actually, in the couple of the videos that Jared made last year, this stream's in it. And that spot right there, is where it is. I recognized it, and it was flowing over. It has a nice little waterfall. But anytime you have these dark, shaded springy areas, this is one of my very favorite plants. This one's horsetail, and they call this freshwater asparagus. And you can see how it's got the little dark lines right here, especially when the foliage starts falling away. You're going to see just a reed with these little dark lines looking real similar to asparagus, only they got them little teardrop leaves that are dark. But this is full of silica. This is the heaviest silica bearing plant in the world. And silica is basically a form of quartz, which is again one of your cell salts. And that one happens to chelate heavy toxic metals that most of the world is suffering from right now. And that's going to break that down and flush that out, or let your body place it where it needs to be placed because it's been chelated. So this one's a really, really important plant to use, have around, eat. It's, again, they call it the freshwater asparagus, so it's a good plant just to eat too. But we found a few fields of it, so I'm going to be harvesting that. And we're going to make a nice tincture out of it and make that available to the public to try and help with this toxic heavy metal problem that we're having in the world today. Here is the wonderful spot where the cops who came, as you can see, there's no marijuana plants anywhere here, but across this big pile of trees, in a completely separate area, they somehow figured that this building's attached to that or something. I don't know. Who knows what cops think when they get all antsy in their pantsy with guns and battering rams. So they came down and dunk, 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 dunk. Tried to come knocking, but I've heard of the big bad wolf before. So this is a solid 2x4s right here. And I took and hand chiseled out my spots. So when they came knocking, this is actually all just, and nothing happened, but they almost punched a hole through the door. That was impressive. So this was the lab. We've started tearing it down. It's not on our property. We're gonna have to rebuild it. Thankfully, Steve's coming. He's I'm not particularly a carpenter. Steve is. So we've just got what little's left. These are actually the chillers that bring everything down. Heat and cold at some point in time, all you're talking about with these things is causing a molecular change. And at some point in time, they're kind of the same thing. And so what I've transferred over to doing is most of my alchemy that I can, I'm doing at severe negative temperatures. As you can see, this one's a 20 liter machine, but it goes to -40. This one over here, this one's a 50 liter for -30. All this is doing is some of my material as it's passing back through these are called a heat exchanger. And this freezes down any liquid that comes in through this side. This side is going to the chiller. So anything that's going through this side, and I've got two of them stacked, is going to freeze down to -30 before it ever even hits the next machine, which is attached to this -41. And then the whole room is got a couple of whole house air conditioners, try and bring the whole room down to 60 or better. Which that system we're actually even going to improve at this next spot. But so, you know, I step out in the afternoon in the summer and it's 60 degrees in here, and I step out, it's 110. It's almost wilting. Yeah, that's I'm usually actually used to living pretty much with just completely with the tent, with the weather, but that's pretty wilting. These blow out a lot of heat, so I had these back in here and with its own air conditioner, because these are actually venting. They're taking all the heat out of this fluid and exchanging it and freezing that, but the heat's got to go somewhere, so it blows out the sides of these machines and really heats up the area, and we don't want that heating up the actual work area, so we got that kind of a separate in a separate thing. But this is getting torn down for the most part, and hauled up top and then rebuilt, so that's going to suck. But thankfully Steve Poikinen is on the way, and that will make it suck much less. And this is one of the things I love the most about this area. Wild huckleberries, wild blackberries. There's so much fruit and just free food around here that you can take the time to pick, go store. You can see my cows, they appreciated it. That's where I was, this is over here is where I let them out of from this morning. I'm not sure how they got across, but they did. There's the evidence. Like blackberry bushes, this is considered a bad plant in California, an invasive plant, because it takes over everywhere and provides all these wonderful blackberries. That's how easily it grows, which is part of what I talk about with why I follow Odin. Because when you put a plant in its native soil, it doesn't require the same amount of work. It doesn't require anything to grow. This plant, literally, you can't hardly stop it from growing because it's in its native soil. Now, if we took this to someplace else that did not have these same growing conditions, the plant might start growing. Maybe you could talk it into it, maybe not. Either way, it's not going to do like here where you can't hardly stop it from growing. It just thrives all on its own. These are the trees I was talking about with, you can see here I take and chop this one to see what kind of condition we're looking at. And this one was up off the ground, away from other trees, stacked right. And I sawed it, and you can see this is all breaking down, you know. Maybe the very, very core is not quite rotted. That's about it. So what you do is you come by with a drill, you drill a big hole in it, and you buy mushroom plugs, chuck a mushroom plug, you know, go to the back side over here where it's nice and damp and staying damp and not so sunny, throw some mushroom plugs in them. Yeah, so on the back side of these logs and where it's closer to the river, so it's going to hold the moisture a little better, we'll come back here and we'll drill little holes in them, and we'll stick some mushroom plugs in them, see if we can't start growing some decent mushrooms. One of the only things you got to look at with mushrooms is a lot of mushrooms are real specific to the tree, and so certain mushrooms will grow on certain trees, so you need to also identify what kind of tree you're dealing with, and that's going to tell you what kind of fungi will grow on it. Like, even look right there, that's an interesting fungi. It's not gonna be, but it almost looks like a chaga. Mushrooms are so versatile and amazing. Now, when you're talking about mushrooms, you're talking about really the opposite of a fruit, where a fruit's gonna have that sulfuric vibrancy to it, that sun energy. Your mushroom's gonna have your root power to it, and mushroom's not going to be a heavy oil. It's going to be a real heavy salt. You know, it's not going to be a real oily substance. So you're going to get a lot more root power. You're really pulling out of the other end of things, which is beautiful. So you really need to mix both. When you're looking at life, you should really be balancing your fungi and your fruit much more heavily. Most people do almost no fungi and a ton of everything else, where you need to bring that fungi up and balance it more with the fruit. Chaga in and of itself It has a ton of medicinal uses, a ton of medicinal uses. One of the ugliest mushrooms you ever saw. It just literally looks like a pile of crap, if you know the mushroom corn smut, you know, it's almost like some corn smut growing off the side of a tree, and it's all black and nasty looking. It's just horrible. But the medicinal benefits that you're getting out of that are just shocking. And if they were recommending it for the COVID's primarily been a lung issue, a respiratory issue. So I'm going to guess that it probably has some respiratory benefits on it, and which does make sense because a lot of your things that you're drawing from, like pine trees in and of themselves, part of why people that have breathing problems really enjoy it when they get out into the forest isn't just because of the quality of the air, where the trees are pulling all the carbon out of the air and allowing you to get a much purer oxygen. There's also a quality that the pine trees themselves are releasing an oil and a terpene, and that oil from the pine trees tends to open up your passageways really heavily. So you've got that whole thing going on too. So I can definitely believe that that would have some respiratory benefits to it, without a doubt. I don't have a lot of availability to chaga. I try and pick as many things as I can myself naturally. Chagas, I just don't live around birch. If you're looking at chaga, I've never lived down there, but from the way I understand it and what I've read, it's primarily going to be the down south and in the birch heavy areas, and again in your damp, dark areas. I am on a couple mushroom identification and learning sites, and like every day there's at least 3-4 pictures of somebody. Is this chaga? Is this chaga? And actually 90% of the time it's not even on a birch tree. So something that I'm trying to get more heavily into, and is very important without a doubt. It really isn't. It just looks like a pile of shit on that tree. Look at this. Hear that? Just a little lighter flame, and these things will catch while they're green. Like, this is one of the worst ones, is with the fires. That pepperwood, it burns like fucking 1,000 degrees. It's insane, and it lights super easy. Christy and I last year took some Manzanita from around the property and took the time to grind it down and sand it down and polish it, and then I took and sealed it up with beeswax and carved runes into it and a whole nine. It was such a cool staff, and we went to Renfest, all kinds of people trying to buy it and everything. It was just so nice. And then the first time I went like that and hit it on the ground, it snapped, just came apart, just like it was glass or something. It was just so brittle. And Christy, hers, I took and I broke it. Oh, I felt like such a douche. I took it, and sometimes I get something out of place in between my shoulder blades, so I'll take like a broom or a stick and put it in there and go like this, and it'll pop it, and it just went poof. And I was like, oh, oh no, oh no. And of course she's standing right there just looking at me. I'm like, I wasn't here. Good old Henry got to come check out what we're doing. Yeah, when he does that thing at you, I think that's him wanting to get petted. But it's so scary that you're not 100% sure what's going to happen with it. I've petted him over the fence like that, though. And he came to us one-eyed, so obviously it was fitting that his name would be Odin. Right. Of course we would have a one-eyed bull. And honestly, at the time, because I have Dexters, I can't breed my cows against just any cow. Dexters specifically have A2 milk compared to A1 milk. A1 milk was what most people get. And your A1 cow, like your Holstein cow, is going to produce like 8 to 10 gallons of milk a day. and it's way better for commercial because obviously it's better to sell 8 to 10 gallons. Whereas my girls will only, the maximum, if you milk them twice a day, the maximum I think you ever get out of them is about 3 gallons a day. 2 gallons about what we get usually, gallon and a half, 2 gallons, and then that's not really commercially feasible. So they go with the A1 milk. Well, again, because I've done the small farm thing, now I get the high quality A2 milk that does, and the A1 protein is the one that is lactose intolerance. That's, you reject that A1 protein. The A2 protein people don't reject like that. We've actually, over at Richie and Teensy's house where they were before, they have friends that the one kid, his entire life has been lactose intolerant, and he even had to have soy milk, and he drank Sunshine's milk with no problem. So it's again just an issue of when you commercialize something, and that is the dinner bell, courtesy of Dan Gibbs.
California, Arizona, I harvest your crop.